Thank you all for being here. It is great to have representation from the Brazilian government, from Amazon, and from VCMI. I am very excited about this discussion, so let's get into it. Jose, I'll start with you. There seems to be some momentum around carbon markets at COP30. We heard from Ravi Menon and Rachel Kite earlier about what the what the UK and Singapore are doing. But can you give us the scoop on what Brazil is hoping to achieve at COP30? And also, because this is a corporate audience, how do you expect that to ultimately trickle down into what companies are doing in the carbon space?
Okay, now it works. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Brazil. Welcome to São Paulo. It's a pleasure to have you all. Especially in this moment, we are really thrilled to have COP30 coming in the next week. And I think that, answering directly your question, there is a big momentum for carbon markets at COP, but also internally here in Brazil. Last year in December, the Congress passed our landmark bill on introducing an ETS in Brazil, the law 15042, that now we are moving to implementation stage. It will take some years to put the system up and running. But there are some features there that will have consequences for the voluntary market that I wanted to highlight here. The first one is that we understand the Brazilian ETS as a source of constant demand for voluntary credits as well. So we know that, at least in Brazil, one of the assessments that we made of our market is that we have a lot of potential, we can grow a lot, we can be a provider of climate solutions for the world, but we do need some policies to make this all happen. We have to create this. We have to support this this market that is at its beginning. So for this reason, our law requires that the system allows for a percentage of offsets. This will entail constant demand for those projects, and we think that this will play a role in bringing more actors to this market. The second feature is that the managing body of our ETS will have a role to certify methodologies regarding high quality, regarding measurements and other technical issues, with the idea to serve as a sort of a gatekeeping role for the voluntary market. That means that we're going to accept only high integrity, and by defining what's high integrity for the Brazilian government, will serve as a lighthouse for the voluntary market as well. Well, at least this is our ambition. Let's see. The next year we're going to have some news on this regard. And finally, also, we're gonna, as government, the government will provide its rules for engaging with Article 6. So, of course, this is a huge source of demand for our projects and for our voluntary markets, and we tend to use it responsibly, of course, with a look to our NDC goals, but as much as we can, taking advantage of this mechanism. And given all this internal momentum, when we were deciding about what we would bring to COP30, the Minister of Finance, together in conversations with other actors, thought that it would be a great idea to bring countries together, bring other ETSs together to come up with common rules for some technical issues as well, such as MRV standards, as for example, carbon accounting as well. But for use of offsets too, meaning that we would love to have a common understanding between ETSs all over the world as to what sort of voluntary credits are allowed in their systems, recognizing some sort of project types as robust and meaningful from the environmental point of view.
And Jamie, sorry, can I pass to Jamie and ask,
Sure, of course.
as a corporate buyer, how do you view these government initiatives? And then more broadly, Amazon is obviously very active in offsets, and that's even against a backdrop where the voluntary market in total has been shrinking. So can you just explain your strategy?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Jamie. I lead carbon neutralization at Amazon, and that's that third pillar of the climate pledge, which is our net zero by 2040 commitment. And the idea is that we need to be prepared to neutralize our residual emissions after a decarbonization journey, and yet we've got a carbon market, which is the tool to do that, which is not yet at scale and not yet at the quality standards that we believe we need to have to kind of trust this mechanism ourselves and for our customers to trust it. And so we sort of set out at the beginning of this journey to not to buy some credits for Amazon to feel good about ourselves and pat ourselves on the back, but to stimulate sort of systems changes and shifts in the ways that the carbon market is focused in generating mitigation outcomes so that we can have much greater scale, much faster, at much greater quality. Just as one example, we co-founded the LEAF Coalition together with the governments of Norway, the United Kingdom, the United States, and a couple dozen other companies to help spur the jurisdictional RED segment, where Brazil is showing leadership and a number of other countries around the world. So there's been a pullback in the voluntary carbon market, but I actually view that as sort of a necessary step forward, right? We had a carbon market that was created to help companies channel more money towards good stuff, and it did that. But now we're sort of starting to rely on it as one of the engines to help us get to the Paris Agreement targets, and we should ask serious questions about whether it's up to snuff for that kind of purpose. And it's required some retooling. That retooling has necessarily increased the prices of high quality credits quite considerably. And you've had some companies step back and reevaluate, and that's a good thing. We had sort of a clearing of weak hands, and now I think what I'm hearing from other companies is very much an interest in coming back in or coming in for the first time in the right way, because now they feel like there's some supply coming that's actually trustworthy, and we can grow it from there.
And Mark, picking up on that, some of that pullback that Jamie was just talking about is relating to credibility issues that we have seen. So in that context, what have businesses been telling you that they need to see fixed in order to have confidence in the market? And what are the hardest things to achieve within that? You know, what are the real sticking points?
Yeah, thanks for the question. I mean, we did some market research earlier this year. As you know, VCMI is the secretariat for this coalition to grow carbon markets with Singapore, Kenya, UK, and others. So we did some market research to understand what businesses were looking for and what were their attitudes towards markets. And it was interesting because it was both forward-looking and backward-looking. The backward-looking was a literature survey, and the forward-looking was focus groups. If you look backwards, companies wanted to buy carbon credits. You alluded to this for brand and reputational purposes. They want to be able to say we're carbon neutral or carbon leaders or whatever it happened to be. Looking forward, that didn't even make it onto the list. What companies now are saying, and I echo what you say, there's huge latent demand for carbon credits, but they need a business case. And the business case is about either being able to meet targets or hedge against the cost of future targets, reduce the cost of meeting targets, and alongside that to meet nature and social goals. There's still concerns about the credibility of or the quality of credits themselves. Though, as Jamie said, there's this retooling or this reworking of the market, and people are now seeing that through the work of Article 6 or ICVCM, the ratings agencies, that it's now easier to identify what is a good and bad credit. So they want to have a business case. They want to be confident they're not going to be hauled out in public for making what they thought was a legitimate attempt to do the right thing, but are accused of making a false claim or misleading the public. And then increasingly they say, we need to reduce the transaction cost of this. If every time we want to buy 20 credits, we have to pay for an expensive consulting firm, or we have to hire a team of 10 people internally to do due diligence, the game's not worth a candle. So we want to have a market that we can trust, that we can go to the market, buy some credits. It looks like a financial market. We know how to account for it. We know what the credit is, and we don't have to go through the mill every time we want to do it. We just buy it, and we know the quality is going to be good enough.
And we are talking here to a group of current or potential buyers of offsets, but the broader backdrop is one where the president of the world's biggest economy calls sustainability a green scam. So Jamie, do you think US companies will stay engaged in the voluntary carbon market?
I think I'm interested in growing the kind of crew of companies in the voluntary carbon market that are serious about preparing for competitiveness in a low carbon future. And you can't do that if you're thinking about the next 2-3 years. You have to think in kind of decadal time horizons. And this also relates to sort of the demand side integrity piece, which I can touch on. We're not going to make real progress unless you have companies that are seriously focused on preparing themselves for that low carbon future. And the companies that are serious about that, the first thing they think about isn't buying carbon credits, it's about decarbonizing their own business. So that leaning their business for that low carbon future, right? And that's the dynamic within Amazon, right? I have a team, we buy carbon credits to help kind of spur the market, so it's there for us down the line. We have 50x the number of people working on decarbonization across the business. And I'm seeing that Amazon's not that unique. We're big and we have kind of broad value chain, but we've started to engage our suppliers. My team and a sister team has started to engage our suppliers around participating in the carbon market, and we hear a similar kind of response, which is it's not so much about money, it's really about the people. We've got limited resources in-house to navigate sustainability issues broadly. Most companies have much smaller sustainability teams than Amazon, and there's a concern about if I enter the carbon market, I gotta hire someone just to figure that out, and I'd much rather hire someone to buy renewable energy for us. And we want them to do that also because they're in our supply chain. And so when they buy renewable energy, our scope 3 goes down. And so that's the reason why, and Ashley mentioned this in her remarks, we've created a credit service so that our suppliers can participate, have an avenue for participating in the carbon market without hiring that expensive sustainability consultant, without having to hire that dedicated person in-house, because Amazon has a team and we do the diligence and the origination and the unlocking, and they can simply purchase from our portfolio. So we're starting to see real interest from serious actors who aren't just wanting to buy credits to buy credits. It's part of a much broader effort, which is principally focused on decarbonization, but they understand also that I need to be prepared to participate in carbon markets, either for a regulatory future down the line or to respond to customer interests and competitive pressures.
And Jose, how is Brazil trying to navigate that global environment at COP? How do you reach consensus in a time when that seems difficult to obtain?
Actually, it's a challenging moment, but this idea of the open coalition for compliance carbon markets have had some good support from different countries. I think looking at the world, we have more and more developing countries engaging in carbon pricing, either taxation or ETSs. We have a lot of firms, a lot of initiatives such as VCMIs that are interested in developing these common rules. And I guess that we are in this moment where we have to come up with worldwide rules that are agreeable to everyone. And I think that bringing together these initiatives, we can go much beyond our current ambition.
And especially given where we are today, obviously some people in the audience are based here in Sao Paulo, but many people have flown in. I want to make sure that we talk about forests and indigenous communities because that's a huge theme of this COP. So Mark, how should companies be thinking around forest offsets and their community impacts?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things we talked about how the market's retooled itself, one of the things it's had to do is recognize that just flying in, pretending or otherwise that you're protecting or planting a forest and going out again isn't fit for purpose. Arttrees that Jamie mentioned is strong guidance for engaging local communities. We, through our Access Strategies program, for example, worked with the state of Yucatan, and there you have to consult with all the ejidos. There's a specific amount that has to be set aside for the local agricultural and forest-based communities. I think that those are just examples. I think everyone realizes, both for reputational reasons, but also for legitimate climate and sustainability reasons, that if you don't build on, take into account, but actually not just take into account, engage the communities who are protecting the forests, who depend on the forest from the outset, not only, if you don't do that, not only are you failing morally, your project is more likely to fail as well. And so we're seeing this, take the ICBCM's rules, which create the core carbon principles. The ICBCM has created the Indigenous Peoples and Local Communities Forum. It's not something that the ICBCM run, it's run by representatives of indigenous communities and local communities. And it's not just about how do you consult with us at the project level, it's how do those communities get involved in designing the rules of the market. And I think that's a really important step change that is perhaps underestimated. In the past, there's often been what people might sometimes accuse of sort of box ticking. Yeah, we talked to somebody from the community and they said it was fine. But actually, you need to involve those communities at the governance of the system level, at the project methodology and project design level, and then in the project implementation as well. And that is increasingly happening. And in fact, we have a couple of projects here in Brazil, in Amazonian states, looking to do precisely that.
And Jamie, can you explain the evolution of Amazon's thinking on what an effective deforestation project should look like?
This is one of the, when I was hired maybe 5 or 6 years ago, there was the sort of, everyone was talking about carbon removal because the 2018 IPCC report had just come out. So we have to figure out how to kickstart this kind of capacity and kind of build that supply long term. And it kept kind of nagging at us, like, how are we going to build a big old portfolio of carbon removal while the forest continues to burn? And we just paused and said, we can't overlook this. We have to tackle this problem. What's the right theory of change? How do we go about addressing, from our standpoint? There are a lot of ways to get at the drivers of deforestation, but from a carbon market kind of tool standpoint, what's the right way to do it? And we kind of quickly came to the conclusion that, like, you have to have public sector mechanisms. We're not going to, in the IPCC pathways, all of them, global forest cover stops declining in 2030 and then starts to rebound over the rest of the century. So we have to basically halt deforestation now in the next 5 years, which is a harrowing imperative. And there's no way you do that with a patchwork of projects. You need, legal protections for the forest, you need enforcement of those protections, you need partnerships with indigenous peoples and local communities, better agriculture sector planning. You have to have that government at the table, and you have to have the communities at the table as well, not having had to develop their own, carbon project. And so that was sort of the impetus for us to create the LEAF Coalition together with our partners in Norway and UK and the United States, which was, that's a big thing. If we're gonna do jurisdictional REDD, we're gonna need a lot of money for that. We're gonna need to spur a lot of demand for that. And there's a lot of work that needs to happen up front on the government side and on the community engagement side to get those programs off the ground and running. And so let's send a really clear demand signal on the front end. If you can deliver this, we will be here and we will provide the finance.
And Jose, you're part of Brazil's new Carbon Markets Secretariat, as you mentioned earlier. How will you identify those high-quality forest projects?
No, I got it. Well, this is something that we have to still decide in terms of government decision. But I do think that, at least in Brazil, we have some very good technical capabilities in the government. So coming from satellite images, but also, as you were mentioning, the importance of bringing these communities to the table and discuss it. We have government institutions that are exclusively working with indigenous people, with traditional communities as well. We have a lot of databases on the land ownership that is really important in the Amazon states. So I think one of our challenges is to bring all this sort of information and institutions together and think about a way of really ensuring and providing solutions for greenwashing and other fraudulent activities that sometimes happens in these type of projects.
And I want to make sure we leave time for audience questions, but I'll just ask one last question to the three of you, which is, given how complex everything that you've just discussed is, what, let's say 12 months from now, what is it realistic to think we could have achieved? What does success look like 12 months from now?
So a couple of things. One, I think you've heard about the open coalition that Brazil is leading. We're obviously the Secretariat for the Coalition to Grow Carbon Markets, and there are others looking at different pieces of it. I think companies, and to hear what you think, would want to see how those pieces fit together. I think they are deeply complementary. The coalition that we're the Secretariat for is about mobilizing private sector demand internationally for carbon credits. It connects very well with the offset bit that you talk about with ETSs and carbon. So I think clarity from governments on how the things they're doing fit together, and that the rules or regulations or incentives that they're putting in place are complementary, not competing or confusing with each other. I think that's one thing. I think a continuation of the trend that we're seeing, that Jamie mentioned, that there are higher prices for higher quality carbon credits, and that people see that price reflects quality, and that continues to do so. And we're seeing that, linked to the ratings that ratings agencies provide, and so on and so forth. That will give people greater confidence. And then I think perhaps equally, if not more important, is companies actually coming back to the market and saying that latent demand becomes extant demand. We are putting some money in there because we know, and we have clarity from governments or standard setters, this is how we can use carbon credits as part of that broader climate transition or decarbonization journey. But those three things, we're in great shape.
How about you, Jamie?
I want to speak just quickly on the demand side. We have to significantly grow demand for this market over time if this all is going to work out. Today, there's very little volume in the legacy carbon market, I'll say, that I can find conviction in from a technical standpoint. I don't get mad about it, but we've got some real improvements to make. We've been putting in kind of investments over the last 5 years or so to help spur new supply. We're just on the precipice of that supply coming to market. And so until that happens, I can't go to our suppliers and say, we want you to start participating, unless I can help them access credits that I myself want to purchase for Amazon. And so we're a little bit we're getting started, but we're a little bit impeded by that lack of truly high quality supply that we have conviction in. Once that supply comes, right, I think there's 6,000 companies that I read somewhere in the entire world that buy carbon credits at all. We have millions of companies in our value chain. So the minute there's real volume and sort of liquidity, and it's going to come from jurisdictional red at the start, and it'll kind of become a more of a blend over time, we can unlock all kinds of things that can help to spur demand. And if we can do that, other big companies can do that as well. So I think there's a lot of innovation to come on bringing new demand in and helping companies find the right business case for participation. And once we have that in combination with things like the ETS in Brazil, then you can really drive innovation on the supply side because you've got demand.
And Jose, how about you? 12 months from now?
Yeah. First, let me echo what Mark said. I think we need a coalition of coalitions. But I do think that at some point in the future, because ultimately we have the same goal, right? We have to have a high integrity voluntary market. We have to have a demanding ETS. So, I mean, we are aiming at the same thing. It's a matter of, letting time work, and we're going to have one single guidance to rule them all. But secondly, I think that if in 1 year from now we have, at least in Brazil, more projects happening, new projects, and in different areas, but specifically in the forest and regeneration in afforestation projects as well. And in terms of the voluntary market, a clearer guidance for project owners, for credit buyers on what's high-level principle, and also the government being able to vouch for this label, right? So that they can be more confident on what they are buying and that the money flows to the activities that need finance.
Sounds like it's going to be a busy 12 months. Thank you all very much. I'd now like to open to the floor for questions. We only have one spare mic, so Abby's going to run my mic to whoever wants to ask the first question. If you could raise your hand.
Any takers? Come on. Oh, I got someone.
Thank you. Jose, I wanted to congratulate you and Christina Reyes, your colleague, and everything that you're doing at the ministry. So well done. The question's for you. Can you comment on more specifically about Brazil having its own certification body, and if, for example, BB, Banco do Brasil, would set up an arm's length company to do that? And likewise, a local registry, and could that potentially end up being officially B3, the exchange?
Sure. Thank you for the compliment and thank you for the question. There have been some talks about having a Brazilian certificate institution. Uh, we are not directly involved because we're going to be the regulatory body of the market, so we don't want to have any conflict in that. But basically, I think the idea comes from two assessments. The first one is that there are significant obstacles to certification in Brazil, meaning that it takes months until Vera or other standards provide even the simplest guidance for the project developers. And as well, the verifying bodies similarly are an obstacle here because normally they are outsourced, they stay in abroad, and it's costly to do this verification process. So that's one thing, and the second the second thing is that the business in Brazil complain that the emissions factor used in these methodologies are often comes from the developed countries, and they are not suited for the tropical environment that Brazil is in. So they say that, for instance, land farming captures much more carbon that they internationally they think, and other issues as well. So that's why there are some banks grouping so that they can develop this national certification process, so to speak.
Anybody else? Oh, hi.
Hi. Thanks everyone. I'm Don Probin. I'm from Aon, the reinsurance broker. So I came from the session downstairs. So the banks were a couple of the banks, Standard Chartered included. Were talking about the role of finance and a little bit about the role of insurance within this market. So we talked a little bit about policy and about quality. But what do you see the role of the broader financial services sector in helping to unlock growth in this space?
I can take that. More so in the project-based approaches, and so on the carbon removal side, reducing deforestation, or kind of thesis is you got to have public sector mechanisms for that. On the reforestation restoration side, governments also have a critical role to play, but you need capital. It costs money to plant trees and to steward those trees over time, or even to naturally regenerate trees and to sustain that. So a lot my team is focusing in good bit on mobilizing finance from the financial sector by signing long-term bankable offtake agreements. It works just like renewable energy, where you sign a long-term power purchase agreement. It's a carbon removal offtake agreement. It's bankable. It allows finance to come. So that's a big one. And I'm very excited about, 5 years ago, the financial sector was like, oh, the voluntary carbon market, I don't know how real is that, but there's been a lot of progress, a lot of serious thinkers now coming to the table, new funds created, that kind of thing. On the insurance side, all these project developers have delivery risk and they have permanence risk, and there's a big open field, I think, for insurance companies to play a role there, especially in nature-based solutions, where I think inevitably we're going to move to a sort of a horizontal, that's a wonky term, but a horizontal stacking approach, where if and when there's a reversal, that credit gets replaced. There's not a buffer pool that you sort of contributed to on the front end and wash your hands of. There's sort of an ongoing utility, if you will, that's going to actually replace it. And that's going to require some sort of insurance or quasi-insurance-like scheme.
If I can just add to that, I think there's some detail that the bigger picture, if you think of the financial sector and financial institutions, a role of sort of risk management, spreading and mitigation, capital allocation, and market creation, there are huge activities across all three of those. And in particular, using the tools that you have expertise in, that the financial markets have developed over decades, and applying them to carbon markets so that there are fungible units. And I go back to the point we were making about how much cost it is in terms of time and people and money to do the due diligence on projects, to make sure that you're getting what you're paying for and all the rest of it. Financial markets, if we can move the carbon credit market to something that from something that looks like a Sunday morning flea market to something that looks more like like a financial market, recognizing there are going to be different types of credits and they're each going to have, so like any other commodity, there may be different types and different grades and different qualities, but that doesn't mean you need to have a completely different type of transaction for every single project in credit. I think there it brings liquidity, it'll bring scale, it'll bring confidence, and that's the biggest role the financial sector can play.
Well, I'm sorry we have run out of time, but our speakers will be here for a little while. I hope everyone is sticking around for a bit. So if there are any questions that were not answered, I did see one at the back. Please come and direct them to them individually. The program in the plenary starts again at 2 o'clock, so there's a little bit of time for. We're still on for 2 o'clock, right, Abby? Excellent. So there's a little bit of time for networking. I hope everybody enjoyed this session. Thank you very much again to Amazon and to our speakers.